He felt as if his heart had dried up. I needed her, he thought. I needed someone like her to fill the void inside of me.
But I wasn't able to fill the void inside her. Until the bitter end, the emptiness inside her was hers alone.
There is a precedent of exploring feminine themes associated with insanity in many works of literature. It often goes like this. A mysterious young woman who doesn't care what others think about her but is still somehow hauntingly beautiful slowly loses her sanity as a novel progresses.
Maybe you've even read a book or two like this. Here's a question. Can you identify why the woman loses herself? Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote perfectly encapsulates how the elusive woman is typically described. For all her chic thinness, she had an almost breakfast cereal air of health, a soap and lemon cleanness, a rough pink darkening in the cheeks. It was a face beyond childhood, yet this side of belonging to a woman. I thought she was anywhere between 16 and 30. As it turned out, she was shy 2 months of her 19th birthday. Immediately off the bat, the description of Holly Golightly is unsettling, with an unnecessary emphasis on her youth. Throughout the book, Holly and her problems are heavily romanticized, which dehumanizes her and belittles her experiences, her main character trait being a mysterious woman.
Another example is portrayed in the works of Murakami, more specifically Sputnik's Sweetheart. The narrator, Kei's object of desire, Sumire, is portrayed extremely one-dimensionally. She is described as a hopeless romantic, a bit set in her ways, innocent of the ways of the world, to put a nice spin on it. Still, Sumire had something special about her, something that drew people to her. Defining that special something isn't easy, but when you gaze into her eyes, you can always find it, reflected deep down inside. She gets so engrossed in her thoughts, at times she forget to eat, and she was as thin as one of those war orphans in an old Italian film, like a stick with eyes. I'd love to show you a photo of her, but I don't have any. Kei is in love with Sumire, and so the entire novel is painted through a skewed lens, idealizing very problematic features of Sumire. But different from Capote's representation, Murakami focuses on the actual regression of Sumire until her disappearance.
At any rate, Sumire was ecstatic, her heart fluttering, just to be able to meet Mew and talk to her. That's the desk where Mew sits, she thought. That's the ballpoint pen she uses, the mug she drinks coffee from. No matter how trivial the task, Sumire did her best. Along with the outright confusing portrayal of Sumire and Mew's relationship, there were constant underlying tones of over-sexualizing their intimacy, despite the emphasis on Sumire's quote-unquote innocence. When Sumire eventually grows sick and disappears, the development of the characters and their motives are unclear, and the reader is left with an icky feeling of Sumire's obsession with Mew.
These two are examples of a general overview of how insanity is incorporated with femininity when written by men. When women write these themes, however, there is far more perspective involved.
An extreme example of this is in Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Flynn portrays a very linear and calculated path into madness of Amy Dunn, her rage mostly directed towards her husband. Amy is cruel and manipulative, and undeniably psychopathic. However, the reader can't help but understand her to an extent, as Flynn fully explores her motives and actively emphasizes the cause of Amy's madness.
For someone like me who likes to win, it's tempting to want to be the girl every guy wants. I was probably happier for those few years pretending to be someone else than I have ever been before or after. But then it had to stop because it wasn't real, it wasn't me. I tried so hard to be easy, but it was unsustainable. I hated Nick for being surprised when I became me. I hated him for not knowing it had to end, for truly believing he had married this creature, this figment of the imagination of a million masturbatory men. Can you imagine finally showing your true self to your spouse, your soulmate, and having him not like you? So that's how the hating first began. Sylvia Plath also depicts insanity in her novel, The Bell Jar, but from a completely personalized feminine perspective. The main character, Esther Greenwood, goes through a mentally difficult period in her life where she becomes suicidal and even gets institutionalized. Plath had also faced similar struggles in her life and ultimately ended her life at the age of 30. The semi-autobiographical book provides a genuine insight into the mind of a quote-unquote crazy woman. I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in my story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death, just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest, and as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet. Esther is afraid of fading into obscurity, unable to make significant decisions to live her perception of a successful life. This causes her intense stress to the point of insanity, as many readers would assume.
So, what is the connection? Well, we were chilling in Tanya's room, listening to our feminine rage playlists, which will be linked at the end of the video. Trying to link all of these books together. We were trying to understand, what do all these women have in common? What was their shared experience? Just like we shared... Never mind.
We knew how important the betrayal of the decay was, but we did not know what caused it. It came to us just like... Never mind. When we were listening to Crack Baby by Mitski, one particular line goes, all these 20 years trying to fill the void.
Almost jokingly, I was like, that's it! Void filling! All these women are trying to fill a void in themselves. They're using things or people to try to feel whole.
The more we thought about it, the more clear it became.
When the characters realize the permanence of their void, it drives them insane. We define having and filling a void as an unfulfillable desire, which leads to unhealthy coping mechanisms to distract and numb out the desire. In The Bell Jar, Esther is a bright, promising girl who bases her self-worth on academic validation and society's superimposed belief of success. The Bell Jar is set in 1953, and Plath deeply reflects on the society Esther's in, where girls with potential always have the same fate. They're forced to give up their careers for marriage and children. Since The Bell Jar is semi-autobiographical, with many of the events mirroring Plath's own life, this quote from the unabridged journals of Sylvia Plath captures the sentiment of a lot of the themes explored in The Bell Jar. What horrifies me most is the idea of being useless, well-educated, brilliantly promising, and fading out into an indifferent middle age. In fact, Esther's main spiral into depression occurs immediately after she returns home from a summer internship in New York and finds out she has been rejected from a writing course. From that moment on, Esther can't sleep or read and attempts suicide 4 times. She tries to fill a societally imposed void in herself with great academic achievement in order to avoid the lifestyle of other well-educated women who aren't outstanding enough to fully pursue their career. She only becomes aware of this void as she gets rejected from this course, and she feels herself losing the prime years of her life. However, after spending time in a psychiatric ward, Esther is seen having hope in her life once again. In Sputnik Sweetheart, we also see a void in Sumire, Kei's love interest. Although Kei is an unreliable narrator, Sumire's stubborn will to become a writer and all-round quirkiness is written as a key aspect of her personality. However, Sumire's naivete, combined with her passionate nature, is the foundation of her void of obsession, which is formed when she meets
a MILF
and falls in love. But the love is not reciprocated, and Sumire falls into madness, literally disappearing off of the face of the earth at the end of the novel. This disappearance can be interpreted in many ways, but we believe she has succumbed fully to her void. This quote is Sumire's moment of realization. And it came to me then that we were wonderful traveling companions, but in the end, no more than lonely lumps of metal in their own separate orbits. From far off, they look like beautiful shooting stars, but in reality, they're nothing more than prisons, where each of us is locked up alone, going nowhere. When the orbits of these 2 satellites of ours happen to cross paths, we can be together. Maybe even open our hearts to each other. But that was only for the briefest moment. In the next instant, we'd be in absolute solitude until we burned up and became nothing.
We realized this void is an extreme presence in Sputnik Sweetheart, and the missing element was that it was how men perceive and impose the void upon women, both through the narration of Kei and the voice of the author. Kei cannot fully understand Sumire's void from Mew because of his cloud of feelings, which is largely a fetishization and very superficial. So when Sumire gives into her intense and detrimental love, it only makes sense that Kei cannot recount the events objectively or even empathetically. To him, Sumire's disappearance can represent that he finally lost her. He realizes that she would not be able to satisfy his desires, and Sumire is rendered worthless to him.
Let's take a look at a very similar novel, parallel in themes of sapphic obsession causing deterioration, but written by a woman and told in the perspective of a female character.
Paradise Rot by Jenny Hval reveals the epitome of feminine decay, following 2 strangers who are roommates in a converted abandoned factory. The main character, Joe, and Carol develop an intimate relationship where each try to fill their own void with the other. But it is unspoken and unrealized, only unfolding in forms of Carol's sickness and the physical rotting and decomposition of their house.
Don't ask.
That is until Pim, man, shows up and breaks their sanctity when he projects his own sexual desire onto them, similar to in Murakami's novel. When their voids become apparent with the creepy story Pym wrote about the two, they fully embody their voids, portrayed hauntingly by a poem Carol writes about the two overcoming Pym's aggressions.
The women feast on the poor man's flesh, and chew each bone whilst it is fresh, so the two women can become one with a kiss, the dream of every biologist.
To grow together is their pursuit, and is red flesh their forbidden fruit. He stumbles and gasps and finally dies. From his ashes will a four-breasted creature arise. In the end, Joe decides to leave Carol, unable to live with such an intense desire that could not be filled.
So, what fills your void? What fills your void?